Look at me when I'm talking to you.
Please stop.
How dare you talk back at me?
The cheating husband hits his wife after gambling, but didn't expect what happened next. Distinguished viewers, welcome to Luxury True Life Stories. Please like and subscribe for more amazing real-life luxury stories. Now, let's get into the story. Jessica Nathan lived a quiet life in the peaceful coastal city of Brighton Harbour. She worked at a small community learning centre where she helped children improve their reading and writing. Everyone who knew her described her as kind, patient, and humble. She lived in a modest apartment and preferred a simple routine: morning coffee at the corner cafe, long walks after work, and evenings spent reading or preparing lessons for her students. To the outside world, Jessica was just an ordinary young woman dedicated to helping others. However, Jessica carried a secret that almost no one knew. She was the hidden daughter of the President of the United States, Danielle Nathan. Her mother, Margaret Nathan, had raised her away from the spotlight so she could live a normal life without the pressure of politics or public attention. Because of that decision, Jessica grew up learning the value of independence and humility rather than power and privilege. Although she lived far from the political world, Jessica still had a quiet connection with her father. Occasionally, they spoke through private phone calls arranged carefully to avoid attention. Danielle Nathan loved his daughter deeply but respected the life she had chosen. While the world saw a powerful president leading a nation, Jessica simply knew him as a father who wanted his daughter safe and happy. President Danielle Nathan lived in the grand residence of the White House, surrounded by advisors, security agents, and constant political pressure. Every day his schedule was filled with meetings, national decisions, and public appearances. To the world, he appeared calm, disciplined, and focused on leading the country. Few people knew that behind the strength he showed publicly, he carried a personal secret that had been carefully protected for many years: his daughter, Jessica Nathan. Jessica had been born before Danielle Nathan entered national politics. At the time, revealing her existence could have created political controversy and drawn unwanted attention to her life. After long discussions with Jessica's mother, Margaret, they made a difficult decision to raise Jessica privately, away from the spotlight. Danielle remained involved in her life quietly, supporting her education and keeping in touch through trusted aides. Though he rarely saw her in person, he followed her progress closely and felt proud that she had grown into a compassionate and independent woman. Late one evening, after finishing a long meeting with his advisors, Daniel sat alone in his office and looked at a photo he kept hidden in his desk drawer. It was a simple photograph of Jessica smiling during her college graduation. He often looked at that photo when the weight of leadership felt heavy. In those moments, he was not thinking like a president, but simply like a father hoping his daughter was safe and living the peaceful life she deserved. One evening, Jessica attended a small charity event organized to raise funds for community education programs in Brighton Harbour. The event was held in a modest art gallery filled with soft music, warm lights, and paintings created by local artists. Jessica had been invited because of her work at the Learning Centre, and she spent most of the evening speaking with donors and explaining how the funds would help children gain better access to books and tutoring. She felt comfortable in that environment because helping others had always been the center of her life. During the event, she met Vincent Collins, a confident and well-dressed financial analyst who had recently moved to the city. Vincent introduced himself politely and seemed genuinely interested in the charity's mission. He spoke smoothly, with an easy charm that made conversations feel natural. Vincent told Jessica he admired people who dedicated their time to improving the lives of others. As they continued talking, he asked thoughtful questions about her work and listened closely to her answers, making Jessica feel respected and understood. By the end of the evening, the two had spent nearly an hour talking about their lives, ambitions, and the city they both now called home. Vincent offered to walk Jessica outside when the event ended, and they continued their conversation under the quiet glow of the streetlights. Jessica left that night feeling pleasantly surprised by the connection they had shared, while Vincent watched her leave with a thoughtful expression, sensing that meeting her might become an important moment in his life. After their first meeting, Vincent Collins made sure to stay in contact with Jessica. He called her a few days later and invited her to dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the harbor. Jessica was usually cautious about new relationships, but Vincent's calm confidence and respectful manner made her feel comfortable. During dinner they spoke about their goals, childhood memories, and the paths their lives had taken. Vincent described his work in finance and his ambition to build a successful career, while Jessica shared her passion for education and helping children gain opportunities she believed everyone deserved. Over the following weeks, they began spending more time together. They walked through parks, visited bookstores, and attended small cultural events around the city. Vincent often praised Jessica's kindness and dedication, telling her he admired how she lived such a meaningful life without chasing attention or wealth. Jessica appreciated his encouragement and believed she had found someone who understood her values. Their conversations grew deeper, and a sense of trust slowly developed between them. As their relationship strengthened, Jessica felt hopeful about the future. Vincent appeared supportive, charming, and determined to build a good life. He spoke about dreams of success and stability, promising that together they could create a strong and happy future. Jessica, who had always lived quietly and carefully, began to believe she had finally found someone she could share her life with. As the months passed, Jessica and Vincent's relationship grew stronger. Vincent became a regular part of her daily life, often visiting the learning center to bring coffee or pick her up after work. Jessica's friends noticed how happy she seemed whenever Vincent was around. He spoke confidently about building a stable future, and his ambition impressed many people who met him. Eventually, Vincent proposed during a quiet evening walk along the harbor, promising Jessica a life filled with support and partnership. Surprised but touched by his sincerity, Jessica accepted. Their wedding was simple and elegant, held in a small garden chapel outside the city. Only a close group of friends attended, along with Jessica's mother, Margaret Nathan. Jessica preferred keeping the ceremony private, consistent with the quiet life she had always lived. Vincent appeared proud and attentive throughout the event, speaking warmly to guests and promising in his vows that he would always protect and support his wife. The atmosphere felt hopeful, and Jessica believed she was beginning a new chapter of happiness. After the wedding, Jessica moved into Vincent's modern apartment in the center of the city. The apartment overlooked busy streets filled with restaurants, offices, and nightlife. At first, everything felt exciting and new. Jessica continued working at the learning center while Vincent focused on expanding his career in finance. To Jessica, their life together felt like the beginning of the stable future she had always hoped for. Life in the city apartment slowly settled into a routine. Jessica continued her work at the learning center, leaving early each morning and returning in the evening with stories about the children she helped every day. Vincent, on the other hand, spent long hours focused on financial markets and investment opportunities. He often spoke about risk and reward, explaining that in his profession bold decisions could lead to major success. At first, Jessica simply saw this as part of his ambitious personality. As time passed, Vincent began spending more evenings out with colleagues after work. He told Jessica these gatherings were networking events where investors and analysts discussed business opportunities. The places he visited were often upscale lounges and private clubs where people with money gathered to talk about markets and deals. During these outings, Vincent was introduced to high-stakes betting tables where wealthy professionals treated gambling as entertainment. Vincent quickly became fascinated with the excitement of it all. The atmosphere, the tension of risk, and the possibility of quick winnings pulled him in. At first he treated it casually, placing small bets just for fun. When he won a few times early on, it boosted his confidence and convinced him that he understood the game better than most people. Jessica remained unaware of how deeply he was beginning to enjoy this dangerous new habit, believing he was simply spending time building his career. As Vincent's interest in gambling grew, his evenings away from home became more frequent. At first, Jessica believed his explanations about late meetings and networking events. She trusted him and had no reason to question his schedule. Vincent always returned home with confident smiles and convincing stories about business opportunities, making it easy for Jessica to believe everything was normal. However, Vincent's growing habit began affecting more than just his time. Some nights he returned home later than usual, appearing tired and distracted. When Jessica asked how his meetings had gone, Vincent would quickly change the subject or give short answers before heading to bed. The truth was that he had started losing small amounts of money at the betting tables. Though the losses were not yet serious, they frustrated him and made him determined to win it back. One evening, after another unsuccessful night of gambling, Vincent arrived home with a tense expression. Jessica greeted him warmly and asked about his day. Without hesitation, Vincent calmly told her he had stayed late at work analyzing market data with his team. It was the first clear lie he told her. Jessica accepted the explanation without suspicion, but for Vincent it marked the moment he began hiding an important part of his life from the person who trusted him the most. Several weeks later, Vincent visited one of the exclusive clubs where wealthy professionals gathered to relax and gamble after long workdays. The place was filled with polished marble floors, soft music, and tables where people quietly placed bets with confident expressions. It was there that Vincent first met Rita Taylor, a striking and confident woman known among the regular visitors of the club. Rita worked as a luxury event promoter and spent much of her time around influential and wealthy individuals. Rita quickly noticed Vincent's ambition and charm. She approached him casually at the bar, introducing herself with an easy smile. Their conversation flowed naturally as they talked about business, city life, and the excitement of taking risks. Rita was someone who enjoyed fast-paced lifestyles and admired people who chased success aggressively. When Vincent mentioned his interest in financial markets and high-stakes opportunities, she encouraged his confidence and spoke about how many successful people embraced risk to reach the top. Over the following nights, Vincent and Rita began seeing each other more often at the club. Rita frequently sat beside him at the betting tables, cheering him on and encouraging him to place larger bets. Her influence made the gambling environment feel thrilling and rewarding, even when Vincent occasionally lost money. Slowly, Vincent began spending more time in Rita's company, enjoying the excitement she brought into his evenings, while Jessica remained unaware of the growing distance forming in her marriage. Vincent's nights at the club soon became routine, and Rita Taylor was almost always the one he arrived. She had a magnetic presence that drew attention wherever she went, dressed elegantly and moving through the room with confidence. Vincent enjoyed the way she admired his ambition and spoke to him as if he were destined for great success. Around Rita, the pressure of his growing losses seemed to fade for a while, replaced by excitement and reckless confidence. Their conversations slowly became more personal. Rita often asked about Vincent's life outside the club, and though he mentioned being married, he spoke about it casually, avoiding details about Jessica. Rita showed little concern for the fact that he had a wife. Instead, she encouraged him to focus on enjoying life and chasing opportunities without worrying about limitations. The more time Vincent spent with her, the more he began drifting away from the responsibilities waiting for him at home. Eventually, what began as casual companionship turned into a secret relationship. Vincent started meeting Rita not only at the club but also at restaurants and late-night lounges across the city. Each meeting deepened the deception he was building around his life. While Jessica continued believing her husband was working long hours, Vincent was quietly dividing his life between the excitement of Rita's world and the quiet home he shared with his unsuspecting wife. As weeks passed, Jessica began noticing small changes in Vincent's behavior. He was home less often, and when he was present, his attention seemed elsewhere. He spent more time checking his phone, stepping away to answer calls, and leaving the apartment for late meetings that seemed to appear suddenly. Jessica tried not to assume the worst, reminding herself that Vincent's career could simply be demanding. Still, a quiet feeling of concern began forming in her mind. One evening, while preparing dinner, Jessica asked Vincent how his work had been going lately. Vincent responded quickly, saying the company was dealing with complicated financial deals that required extra hours. His explanation sounded convincing, but his distracted tone made Jessica uneasy. She noticed he avoided eye contact and seemed eager to change the subject. Although she said nothing further, the conversation stayed in her thoughts long after it ended. Over the following days, Jessica began paying closer attention to the patterns in Vincent's schedule. She noticed he often returned home late at night with a tired and tense expression. Sometimes he appeared frustrated, pacing around the apartment before finally sitting down in silence. Jessica still wanted to trust him, but the growing distance between them made her wonder if something was happening that she did not yet understand. Vincent's gambling had slowly grown from a casual thrill into a serious problem. What had once been small bets for entertainment had turned into larger wagers driven by frustration and the desire to recover previous losses. Each night at the club, he convinced himself that the next game would change everything. Sometimes he won enough to feel hopeful again, but more often he left with deeper losses and growing pressure. The financial strain began to affect his mood and behavior. Vincent started receiving calls from people connected to the betting circles, reminding him about money he owed. Though the amounts were not yet publicly known, the situation made him increasingly anxious. He became impatient at home, often quiet and distracted, thinking constantly about how to regain control of his finances. Jessica noticed the tension building in their apartment. Vincent seemed more irritable and easily frustrated by small things. She tried to support him, suggesting they spend more time together or take short breaks from their busy schedules. Vincent rarely responded warmly to these suggestions, instead focusing on the problems he was trying to solve. The peaceful life Jessica had imagined when they married was slowly being replaced by an atmosphere of unease and uncertainty. One evening, Vincent returned home later than usual after another difficult night at the gambling club. The city outside the apartment windows was quiet, but the tension Vincent carried with him filled the room immediately. His expression was tight with frustration, and he moved through the apartment without speaking. Jessica noticed his mood the moment he stepped inside and gently asked if everything was all right. Jessica had prepared dinner, hoping they could spend some peaceful time together after several distant days. She invited him to sit down and eat, but Vincent responded with irritation, saying he wasn't hungry. His voice carried a sharp edge that surprised her. Trying to understand what was troubling him, Jessica calmly asked if work had been stressful lately. Instead of answering directly, Vincent accused her of asking too many questions and insisted he was simply tired. The conversation quickly turned into an argument. Jessica tried to remain calm, explaining that she was only concerned about him. Vincent, however, was overwhelmed by his own frustrations and the financial pressure he was hiding. The tension in the apartment grew heavier as their voices rose slightly. Though the argument ended without resolution, it left Jessica unsettled. For the first time since their marriage began, she felt that something serious was breaking beneath the surface of their relationship. A few nights later, Vincent returned home after another devastating loss at the gambling tables. The pressure that had been building inside him for weeks finally reached a breaking point. When he entered the apartment, his mood was darker than Jessica had ever seen before. His movements were tense, and he threw his jacket aside with visible frustration. Jessica immediately sensed that something was terribly wrong. Concerned, she approached him carefully and asked if everything was okay. Instead of answering calmly, Vincent reacted with anger, accusing her of questioning him again. Jessica tried to calm the situation, explaining she only wanted to understand what was happening. But Vincent's frustration, fueled by financial loss and stress, caused him to lose control of his emotions. The argument escalated quickly, turning into a frightening confrontation. Realizing the situation was becoming dangerous, Jessica stepped away and tried to create distance. For the first time, she felt genuinely afraid in her own home. The man she once believed would protect her now seemed consumed by anger and desperation. That night marked the moment Jessica understood that the life she had built with Vincent was no longer safe, and she would soon be forced to make a decision that would change everything. After the frightening confrontation, Jessica retreated to the bedroom and locked the door, her hands trembling as she tried to steady her breathing. The apartment that once felt like a place of comfort now felt tense and unfamiliar. She sat on the edge of the bed, realizing the situation had gone far beyond a simple argument. Vincent's anger and reckless behavior had reached a point where she no longer felt safe. For a long moment she stared at her phone, thinking about what to do next. Jessica had spent years protecting the secret of her identity, living quietly without drawing attention to who her father was. She had always believed she could manage her problems privately without involving the powerful world her father lived in. But that night, the fear she felt made her understand that she needed help. With shaking hands, Jessica finally dialed a number she rarely used. After a brief pause, the call connected to a secure line monitored by the president's staff. When her father heard her voice and sensed the distress in it, his tone immediately changed from calm to deeply concerned. Jessica quietly explained that she was in danger. Within moments, the president made a decision. He would personally ensure his daughter was safe, no matter what it required. Not long after Jessica ended the call, the quiet street outside the apartment building began to change. Dark vehicles arrived silently, stopping in careful positions along the road. Security agents stepped out first, moving quickly but calmly as they secured the area. Moments later, another vehicle arrived, and from it stepped President Daniel Nathan, his expression serious and focused. Inside the apartment, Vincent had no idea what was happening outside. He was still pacing around the living room, frustrated and restless after the argument. Jessica remained in the bedroom, waiting anxiously as she heard distant movement outside the building. Within minutes, there was a firm knock on the apartment door that echoed through the hallway. Vincent walked toward the door with confusion, expecting perhaps a neighbor or building staff. When he opened it, he was stunned to see several security agents standing outside, followed by a man he immediately recognized from television and national news. Standing in front of him was the President of the United States, Daniel Nathan, who stepped forward with calm authority as the situation inside the apartment was about to change completely. Vincent stood frozen at the doorway, unable to process what he was seeing. The President of the United States was standing in front of him, surrounded by calm but alert security agents. For a moment the apartment hallway felt completely silent. Vincent's mind raced with confusion, wondering if there had been some kind of mistake. He stepped back slowly as the President and the agents entered the apartment. Jessica cautiously came out of the bedroom when she heard their voices. When she saw her father standing in the living room, relief immediately filled her face. President Daniel Nathan walked toward her and gently held her shoulders, making sure she was safe. His calm but firm presence changed the entire atmosphere of the room. Vincent watched the interaction in disbelief, struggling to understand why the president seemed to know his wife so well. Then the truth was spoken clearly. President Nathan turned toward Vincent and revealed that Jessica Nathan was his daughter. The quiet woman Vincent believed lived an ordinary life was actually the president's child. The revelation stunned Vincent completely. In that moment, the situation he had created through anger, deception, and reckless choices suddenly carried consequences far greater than he had ever imagined. The room remained silent for several seconds after the revelation. Vincent looked from Jessica to the president, still trying to understand what he had just heard. The confident attitude he usually carried had completely disappeared, replaced by shock and uncertainty. The security agents standing nearby watched the situation carefully, waiting for the president's signal. President Daniel Nathan's voice remained calm but firm as he spoke to the agents. He made it clear that Jessica's safety was his first priority. After hearing Jessica explain what had been happening in the apartment and how the situation had escalated, the agents stepped forward. Vincent tried to speak, attempting to explain himself, but the seriousness of the moment made it clear that the situation had already gone too far. Within moments, Vincent Collins was placed under arrest as part of a formal investigation into his actions and behavior. As he was escorted out of the apartment by the agents, the reality of the consequences finally settled in. The reckless choices he had made, his gambling, deception, and anger, had led him to a moment he never expected. Meanwhile, Jessica stood quietly beside her father, knowing that her life was about to change completely. By the following morning, the story had begun spreading across national news networks. Reports described the late-night arrest of Vincent Collins and the unexpected revelation that Jessica Nathan was the previously unknown daughter of President Daniel Nathan. Journalists and commentators quickly filled television programs and online platforms with speculation, trying to piece together how such a secret had been kept hidden for so many years. Outside the apartment building, reporters gathered hoping to capture any new development. News helicopters circled above the city while cameras pointed toward the entrance, waiting for someone involved in the situation to appear. Political analysts discussed the implications of the revelation, while others focused on the personal story behind it. Many people expressed sympathy for Jessica, who had lived quietly for years without revealing her connection to the most powerful office in the country. Inside the protected residence where she was temporarily staying, Jessica avoided the media attention entirely. Her father had arranged security and privacy so she could rest and recover from the emotional events of the previous night. Although the world outside was filled with speculation and headlines, Jessica focused on regaining her peace of mind, supported by the quiet presence of the family she had kept hidden for so long. In the weeks that followed, the legal process moved forward carefully and formally. Vincent Collins remained in custody while authorities reviewed the events that had led to his arrest. Investigators also began examining his financial activities, including the gambling debts that had created so much pressure in his life. What once appeared to be a successful career was now being closely scrutinized, revealing the risky choices he had tried to hide for months. Jessica, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding her sense of stability. Though the situation had forced her secret into the public eye, she found comfort in reconnecting with people who genuinely cared about her. Her mother, Margaret Nathan, spent many days by her side, offering support and reminding her that the difficult chapter she had experienced did not define her future. Jessica also spoke with counselors who helped her process everything that had happened. Despite the attention surrounding her family name, Jessica remained determined to continue living according to the values she had always believed in. She slowly returned to planning programs for children and educational projects she had once managed before the crisis. Though the path ahead would be different from the quiet life she once had, Jessica understood that healing and justice were both important steps toward moving forward. Months later, the intense media attention surrounding Jessica's life had finally begun to fade. The legal process had concluded, and Vincent Collins was no longer a part of her life. For the first time in a long while, Jessica felt a sense of calm returning. Though the past had been painful and public, she had slowly rebuilt her confidence and sense of direction. Jessica decided to dedicate even more of her time to the work she had always loved. With the support of her father and several educational organizations, she helped launch new learning programs for children in underserved communities across several cities. Rather than using her newly revealed connection to power for attention, she used it carefully to create opportunities that would benefit others. Standing outside one of the new learning centers during its opening day, Jessica watched children walk through the doors with excitement and curiosity. The difficult chapter of her life had ended, but it had also given her a stronger purpose. With her past behind her and new goals ahead, Jessica stepped forward into a future defined not by fear or secrets, but by hope and new beginnings. And that brings us to the end of today's story. The world of luxury often hides stories deeper than what meets the eye. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories on Luxury Jewel Life Stories. Until our next story, take care and stay tuned for more.